Welcome back to the audio travel guide. Today, we are shelving the standard itinerary. We aren't going to be standing in line for the Eiffel Tower. We're not fighting the crowds at the Louvre.
Yeah,
We're packing our virtual bags for France, but we're on a very, very specific mission.
exactly. We're trying to look past the monuments to decode what the French call the Art de Vivre, the art of living.
The art of living.
Because you can visit France a dozen times and see every statue.
Yeah.
But if you don't understand the rhythm of the table or, the unwritten rules of the street, you've never really been there.
It's the difference between just sightseeing and actually understanding a place. And it feels like this whole concept rests on two massive pillars. First, social etiquette.
How you treat people.
And second, gastronomy, how you treat your stomach.
And those two are so deeply intertwined. This is a culture where history and geography dictate not just what's on your plate, but how you interact with your neighbor. It's the butter of the north versus the olive oil of the south, sure. But it's also about a strict code of politeness that can, quite frankly, make or break your trip.
Let's start with that code, because I think a lot of travelers, they land in Paris or Lyon and immediately feel a bit of a cold shoulder.
Right.
And they don't realize they've broken a rule in the first 10 seconds of entering a room.
You're talking about the bonjour.
I am talking about the bonjour.
It's not just a word. It's the cornerstone of French civilization. Now, that sounds dramatic, I know, but it's true. In many cultures, like in the U.S., you can walk into a shop, browse, and basically treat the shopkeeper like a background figure until you're ready to pay.
Right, you're on a mission.
If you do that in France, you have effectively just shunned that person. You've treated them like a vending machine, not a human being. The rule is simple. When you cross a threshold, or before you ask a stranger for anything, you must say bonjour.
It's a mandatory acknowledgement.
Absolutely. It's a social contract. If you don't say it, you're the rude one, no matter how polite you are afterwards.
So it's not snobbery, it's about mutual respect. And that sort of feeds into this idea of French directness, doesn't it? We hear the stereotype that the French are blunt or rude.
And it's usually just a misunderstanding of style. French communication is direct. If you ask for something that isn't possible or you make a mistake, they'll just tell you.
And it's not personal.
Not at all. It reflects a culture of exigency.
Exigency, meaning high standards.
Exactly. They're critical of themselves, and they hold others to that same standard. If a waiter corrects you, they aren't trying to humiliate you. They're trying to maintain the quality of the service or the meal. It's a form of caring about the outcome.
I guess that applies to humor, too. I'm known to drop a few bad jokes or loud punchlines, but I get the sense that wouldn't fly at a dinner party in Bordeaux.
You might want to bench the knock-knock jokes. The French really appreciate wit, irony, and sarcasm. They love a good story about a funny life experience, but the whole setup punchline format, it feels a bit artificial to them.
So be witty, not slapstick. And speaking of performing, what about volume? I'm an enthusiastic talker, but I've noticed when I'm on the metro in Paris, it is eerily quiet.
That is by design. The French value quiet in public spaces. Being loud just draws attention to yourself, and in a culture that values privacy and, the collective peace, standing out acoustically is a huge faux pas.
And there's one other privacy boundary that is just absolute kryptonite in conversation: money.
Oh, do not talk about money. Don't ask someone what they earn. Don't brag about what you spent on your watch. It is strictly, strictly private. In some cultures, discussing salary is a way to find common ground. In France, it's just considered incredibly vulgar.
Okay, so the ground rules are set. Say bonjour, keep your voice down, be witty, and keep your finances to yourself. But we have to remember, France isn't a monolith. The vibe shifts drastically depending on where you are on the map.
Oh, it fractures quite a bit. If you go to the southwest, to Bordeaux, you're in a city that's often called Little Paris.
I've heard there's a bit of a rivalry there.
A massive one. The Bordelais and Parisians have this love-hate thing going on. But Bordeaux has a very specific feel. Historically, it was ruled by the English for a long time, and you can still kind of feel that English flair. It's polished, it's a bit bourgeois.
And then you contrast that with Marseille. You go from polished stone to something that feels, well, entirely different.
Marseille is another world. It's a port city in every sense of the word. A melting pot of Italian, Spanish, Comorian, and North African cultures. It is vibrant, it's loud, breaking that quiet rule we just mentioned. And it has a Mediterranean intensity that feels nothing like the rest of France.
And then if you swing east to Alsace, like Strasbourg, you might think you've crossed a border.
In a way, history has crossed the border for you. Alsace has changed hands between France and Germany so many times. You see it in the architecture, you see bilingual street signs, you hear it in the local dialect. It's a region that is fiercely French, but deeply rooted in Germanic traditions.
Which is the perfect segue. You can't talk about French culture without talking about the plate. The Art de Vivre is mostly practiced at the table.
Is the national religion. And before we get into the regional stuff, we have to respect the holy trinity of the French table. Bread, cheese, and pastry.
Let's start with the bread, because this isn't just baking, it's literally about the law.
It is. The baguette de tradition française is a legally defined object. By law, it can only contain wheat flour, water, yeast, and salt. No additives, no freezing.
So when you see a bakery, they're not just defrosting dough.
Not if it's a real boulangerie.
Yeah.
And because this kind of bread has no preservatives, it goes stale fast. That's why bakers bake twice a day. You buy one for lunch, you might buy another for dinner. It's a daily ritual.
And then the cheese. General de Gaulle had that famous line about governing a country with 365 varieties of cheese.
And he was undercounting. There are nearly 400 types. And cheese isn't an appetizer, it's a separate course, served after the main but before dessert. It's like a bridge between savory and sweet.
Speaking of sweet, I think visitors get confused between a bakery and a pastry shop.
Right. You have the boulangerie for bread and the patisserie for pastries. This is where you find the pain au chocolat, which is strictly a breakfast thing, by the way, and the macaron, not the coconut kind, but the little double-decker almond meringue sandwich.
Now, before we sit down to eat, let's clear up the logistics. I feel like the biggest anxiety for travelers is tipping. You finish the meal, you're doing mental math. What's the rule?
Stop doing the math. In France, service is always included. It's called service comprise, and it's usually 15%. That price on the menu is the final price.
So I don't need to leave another 20% on the table.
Absolutely not. In fact, leaving a huge tip can be seen as a bit flashy. Locals might leave the small change, the coins, if service was great. But it is optional.
And water. I'm used to paying for bottled water in Europe.
In France, they're legally required to provide a carafe de top water for free. You just have to ask. But a warning, it usually comes with no ice.
Right. And don't try to eat lunch at 3 p.m.
That is a rookie mistake. France runs on strict meal windows. Lunch is from noon to about 1:30. Dinner is 7:30 to 9:30. Outside those times, most kitchens are closed. You miss the window, you're eating a cold sandwich from a bakery.
Okay, we're seated, we're on time, we've said bonjour, let's take a culinary tour. And we have to start in the place that claims the title of gastronomic capital, Lyon.
Lyon is fascinating. Its food culture is built on the Bouchons. These are traditional, rowdy, friendly restaurants that were originally for silk workers.
So not fine dining with white tablecloths.
Far from it. A Bouchon is about elbow-to-elbow dining, and the food matches. It's hearty, heavy, and uses a lot of offal.
You're talking about things like andouillette.
Yes, the polarizing andouillette. It's a sausage made from tripe. It has a very distinct aroma. You either love it or you hate it.
And for those of us who aren't into tripe,
You could try the quenelle de brochet, which is a delicate dumpling made from pikefish in a creamy sauce, or the cervelle de canope.
which translates to silk worker's brain.
It does,
Yes.
but don't panic. It's actually a seasoned fresh cheese with herbs. It's delicious. But a quick tip for Lyon. Look for the yellow and red label that says Authentique Bouchon Lyonnais. That's your seal of quality against tourist traps.
Let's head south again to Marseille. We talked about the melting pot culture. How does
Yeah.
that translate to flavor?
It tastes like the sea in the sun. The headline dish is Bouillabaisse. But you have to understand, this is not just fish soup. It is a ritual.
How so?
A proper bouillabaisse is served in 2 stages. First, they bring the broth. You eat that with croutons and rouille, a spicy garlic sauce. Then they bring out the fish that was cooked in the broth.
And I've heard this isn't a budget meal.
No. If you see bouillabaisse for 15 euros, just walk away. The real deal is expensive because it takes a huge amount of fresh rock fish to make it right.
And something simpler in the south.
The aioli. It's a grand platter of steamed vegetables and cod, all centered around this intense garlic and olive oil mayonnaise. Simple, but perfect.
Okay, let's go to the heavyweights in the east. Alsace. That German influence, I assume that means sauerkraut.
It does, but here it's Choucroute. Fermented cabbage piled high with sausages, slabs of pork, potatoes. It is mountain food designed to keep you warm.
And they have their own version of pizza, too.
The Flammekueche. It's a super thin dough with creme fraiche, onions, and bacon cooked in a wood-fired oven. It's crisp, light, and addictive.
Yeah.
Or, if you want a food coma, there's Baeckeoffe, a marinated stew of 3 meats: mutton, beef, and pork, slow-cooked for hours.
Speaking of hearty, we can't ignore the Southwest. Toulouse and Bordeaux, this is duck country.
It really is. You have confit de canard, where the duck leg is slow-cooked in its own fat until it just falls off the bone.
Right.
And magret, the breast, seared like a steak.
This brings up that famous French paradox. You look at these ingredients, duck fat, foie gras, and you'd think the health outcomes would be terrible.
Exactly. But they aren't.
Yeah.
And it's often attributed to the quality of the fat. Duck fat is actually pretty healthy. And, of course, the regular consumption of red wine.
And the cassoulet, the big bean dish, right?
The heavyweight champion of Toulouse. White beans, duck confit, pork sausage, all baked until there's a crust on top. It's incredible, but maybe schedule a nap afterwards.
And one oddity from Bordeaux.
Lamprey à la bordelaise. It's an ancient dish. Lamprey is this jawless eel-like fish. They stew it in red wine. It looks a bit terrifying if you see it alive, but the result is rich and almost chocolatey.
Let's wrap the food tour in the north and west. Lille and Nantes.
In Lille, near Belgium, you swap wine for beer. Carbonade flamande is a beef stew cooked in dark beer with gingerbread. And of course, they're famous for moules frites, mussels, and fries.
And Nantes.
That's creep country. But specifically, the galette. These are savory pancakes made with buckwheat flour. They're nutty and crisp, usually filled with ham, cheese, and an egg.
A quick practical note on ordering. You'll see the menu and the a la carte page. I feel like Americans always gravitate to a la carte.
Ignore it. The real value is the menu or prefix. It's a set price for 2 or 3 courses. It's not just cheaper, it's what the chef wants you to eat that day.
And if I order a steak?
Be prepared for saigneur rare. If you ask for bien cuit well done, the chef might actually be offended. For them, overcooking good meat just ruins it.
Okay, we've eaten our way across the hexagon. We are full. We need a drink. France is synonymous with wine, but it can be so intimidating.
The key is geography. In the U.S., you order a Cabernet. In France, you order the region.
So I don't ask for the grape.
No, you ask for a Bordeaux for a bold red. You ask for an Alsace for a floral white. If you're eating oysters in Nantes, you order a Muscadet. The region tells you everything.
And I have to ask about Beaujolais. Every November, there's this marketing blitz.
The Beaujolais Nouveau. It's a fun event, but don't let that define the region. Beaujolais produces some serious high-quality wines called Croisics that are delicious all year and have nothing to do with the hype.
What if we aren't drinking wine? What about the aperitif?
Before the meal, you stimulate the appetite. A classic is the Cur white wine with the black currant liqueur. If you're feeling fancy, swap the wine for champagne, and it's a Cur Royal.
And in the South, they have that distinct yellow drink.
Pastis. It's a meats flavored. You serve it with a pitcher of water, and when you pour the water in, the drink turns milky. It's so refreshing on a hot Marseille afternoon.
And in the West, with the crepes?
Cider? But this is traditional apple cider, often dry, and you drink it out of ceramic bowls or cups, not glasses.
We mentioned beer in the food, but is it a big drinking culture?
In the North and East, absolutely. Alsace is home to huge breweries like Kronenberg. And a popular drink is a panache, a mix of beer and lemonade. A shandy, basically.
Finally, the punctuation mark of the meal. Coffee.
Coffee is the final step. It is drunk after the dessert is finished. You never drink coffee with your steak. It signals that the meal is well and truly over.
So if we zoom out,
Mhm.
we've covered etiquette, regional rivalries, and a lot of calories. What's the big takeaway for someone planning a trip?
That France is not one flavor. You can't just say, I love French food. It really depends on whether you like the butter of the North, the oil of the South, the beer of the East, or the wine of the West.
It's so diverse.
Incredibly.
Well,
But the shared value, the thread that connects the noisy Bouchons in Lyon to a quiet dining room in Bordeaux, is a respect for the act of eating.
the art of living.
Exactly. The meal isn't just fuel. It's a moment in time. And respecting the etiquette, the bonjour, the volume, the meal times, that's your ticket to participating in that moment, not just watching it from the outside.
And if you want to dive deeper into the logistics of these specific places, where to sleep, which museums to see, you should definitely check out our dedicated deep dives for Paris, Lyon, and Marseille. We get into the nitty-gritty there.
Absolutely. Consider this your tasting menu. The main courses are in those city guides.
Here is a final thought to chew on. Next time you sit down to eat, even if it's just a sandwich at your desk, try applying a little of that French exigency. Stop working, really taste what you're eating, and maybe, just maybe, don't talk about your salary while you do it.
Bon appétit.
This has been the Audio Travel Guide.